Let me know when you're ready. Okay, great. I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight. My name is Christine Dar. I'm one of the organizers for the Campaign for Municipal Broadband. We wanted to gather here after we've collected 400 signatures, so let's take a moment to celebrate that. So 400 of your fellow Dubuquers are interested in figuring out how we can get fast, affordable, and reliable internet to every single person in our city. It's an important goal, and I think something that is achievable when we work together. So we wanted to have this forum as a way to educate ourselves and prepare ourselves for the next step of this campaign. So we've invited Curtis, Dean, and Dave Schilling to come speak with us today. They have decades of experience in community broadband efforts. I'll let them say a lot more about what they do. But so we're going to learn about why community broadband would bring a lot of value to our community, why it's an important campaign to work on. We'll also learn about more of the nuts and bolts. I know many people have questions about what specifically that will look like, right? Not only how do we talk to the city council about what's next, but what is the plan? How do we lay that out in our city? So they'll talk about those things, and then we'll also have an opportunity for us to share about why we're interested in working on this campaign. So we hope to hear from you. We'll leave plenty of time for that as well. But if you'll join me in welcoming Curtis Dean.
Thank you, Christine. Can everybody hear me okay? I'll forego the use of the microphone here then. Thank you for the invitation again. It's the second opportunity I've had to come up to talk to some of the folks in your group, and I'm really excited about it. About 21 years ago, pretty much right now, I was sitting in a room with folks like you. And this was in the ancient days, 1997 in Spencer, Iowa, where I lived and worked at the time. And a person in our community, like Christine, saw a need and identified that something could be done. I was contacted by her because she knew I was somebody that was also interested in the topic, and we started this little campaign like you have right now. Our campaign was called ACT Now, which was Advanced Communications Technology Now. And over a period of a few months, we organized our group together. And at that time, the goal of our group was to have the city approve a referendum to authorize a municipal telecommunications utility. And Spencer, Iowa had a very successful, and still does, electric utility and water utility. And so the goal was to see a new utility added into that mix that would be owned and operated by the citizens of Spencer. We were fortunate enough in May of 1997 to see a 91% approval for that vote. So we were really happy with that. A year later, after a feasibility study was done, the engineers and the financial experts said, well, Spencer, you can do this, but you're going to need to identify that you can get at least half of the people in town to switch over their services to you versus the other guys, if in order to make it financially successful and prudent. So our little group got back together. We went out and we actually mailed pledge cards to everybody in town, and the pledge card said, if you build it, I will switch. And we asked them to sign something on the dotted line, and they did. And in about 3 weeks, we had over 60% of the households in Spencer send back one of those. I was then fortunate to become one of the first new persons to work at the utilities in connection with the project. And within about 5 years, we had 70% of the customers in Spencer had switched from, at the time, Mediacom and CenturyLink to our municipal telecom utility. That sounds like a fancy story, but it's really very typical of what has happened in the 24 other communities in Iowa that have built and operated municipal telecommunications utilities. We saw a large number of those communities in the late 1990s and early 2000s that built networks, and we're seeing a new wave of communities that are interested in building new networks. Folks like you in Dubuque, groups in Decorah, Vinton, New Hampton, Charles City, and others that I'll show on a map here in a little bit, are all sitting around saying, how do we solve this problem? Because we think we have a gap in our community for broadband. Just refer to the slide here for a minute. I'm not going to bore you with a long slideshow, but I do have a couple of things I want to use to illustrate some very important points. Whenever I talk to people in a community about should they even look at broadband as something they could do as a community-owned service, I ask them to identify, does your broadband services meet these 4 criteria? Is it fast? Is it reliable? Is it affordable? And is it universally available? We all understand why fast is important when it comes to internet service, right? Especially in these days where our entire lives have become intertwined through the internet. It is no longer a toy. It is a tool for daily living. And if you don't have the speed you need, when you need it, you are not able to live your life the way you want to. Reliability has become as important or even more important in today's world because of that interconnectedness. It used to be if the internet was down for a few minutes, not a big deal, you did something else. But we're kind of running out of things that we can do without using the internet now, right? And so that reliability has become extremely crucial. And the reliability piece is where incumbent providers are coming up short in many, many cases because they're operating older technology that relies on a lot of copper wires, and that copper wire, that type of network relies on a lot of electronics. There are lots of points of failure in those networks as they run the wires around your community. So reliability is a big challenge. Affordability, well, you might say affordability is in the eye of the beholder, right? Because what's affordable for one person might not be affordable for the other. But when you look at the vast group of your community, you want to make sure that everybody, no matter their means, has the ability to be part of the digital economy in one way or another. And so some communities have done, for example, they might call it digital inclusion tier of services. It may not be the fastest thing in the world, but it gets them online and it doesn't break their budget. They get to make that decision because guess what? They run the thing, right? It's their own community-owned network. Relying on a privately owned company to do that because they want to be nice guys is pretty problematic. And finally, universally available. Is service available to all of the people in your community? I know that has been an issue here in Dubuque, not because service isn't available, but you have a very active and proactive city that has been utilizing some existing fiber and some existing conduits and working with private providers to provide direct fiber connectivity to businesses here in town. And that's fantastic. But for those of you who aren't in a business area that has these facilities, or if you're somebody who's working from home like I am, full-time or part-time, then you're maybe on the outside looking in. So maybe that high, reliable, highly speed internet is not available at your home. Also, different technologies have different attributes, and some of them mean that you can't get the same speed at the end of the line as you do from the guy who's across the street from the CenturyLink office. That's just a way the technology works in a DSL network like CenturyLink works. Or you maybe are building a home in a new development and the providers have not built to you yet. There are developments in some communities where people are building $500,000 homes and nobody's running wires to them. They get the electricity, right? Because they have to get electricity because that's a regulated service. They have to get water because that's a mandated service. But the telecommunications providers, and I see this in the Des Moines suburbs all the time, might say, well, we'll wait till there's 10 houses there and then we'll worry about going in. They don't want to go spend the money to run services there until they're pretty sure they're going to have enough people build in that area for them to get their money back. So if you think about your broadband service here in Dubuque or wherever you live, if it doesn't meet these 4 tests, then I would tell you you don't have the type of excellent broadband that we need in today's economy and in today's world. This is a map of the state of Iowa where we've had as much or more activity in municipal telecommunications than any other state in the country. There's a lot of activity in Colorado right now. Colorado is about where we were 15 years ago as far as interest in this. But they haven't built a lot of networks yet. And so right here in Iowa, we're still kind of king when it comes to the number of operating telecommunications utilities that are owned by citizens. Where you see the green boxes and diamonds and squares, those are all utilities that are up and running and are serving customers today. Some of these were built back in the 90s, early 2000s, like I mentioned. They were built with a similar type of hybrid technology it uses both fiber and copper lines. And they continue to use that technology today. Others have taken that older network that they built and retired it and built a brand new fiber network on top of it, such as Cedar Falls. And I'll have Dave talk a little bit about his experience. Where you see red, those are communities that are kind of like where you guys are. They're trying to figure out how to solve a problem locally. They don't think that existing providers will solve that problem for them, and so they're thinking that, you know what, we're going to have to pull up our arms or our sleeves and get it done ourselves. So Dubuque, Macokota. I'm working with a group in Vinton right now. Decorah, New Hampton, Charles City. Those are 4 communities that have all had feasibility studies, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That's one of the steps you go through to move from thinking about it to actually doing it. There are a lot of communities on this map that only appeared in the past few months because of the net neutrality decision that was made by the FCC, which worried a lot of people about, will operators have too much control over what you can or cannot use the internet for? A local provider like a Cedar Falls Utilities, because their mission is only to serve the community, can come out with a strong statement of net neutrality, just as Cedar Falls did, saying, don't worry folks, we got your back here. You know, you own us, so we're going to look out for you. We're going to protect your net neutrality as best we can on a local level. About the time I got to know Christine a little bit, there was one day and I was sitting in my office and I had 4 Facebook conversations with 4 different people from 4 different towns, all asking about what they would have to do broadband. And so that's kind of the conversation that we've been having the past couple of months. Any questions about that? Yes.
I lived in Muscatine for 20 years. I don't recognize the symbol that you have for them.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the symbol there is, okay, the square means it's a hybrid fiber coax system.
That I got.
The diamond in the middle means they have begun to rebuild it to fiber to the home. So Muscatine started with I'll just call it a cable system. They are rebuilding fiber to the home. Cedar Falls started with a cable system, rebuild it to fiber to the home.
Okay.
Spencer's in the process of doing it.
So they're further along than a Muscatine would be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Cedar Falls is done with their rebuild. Spencer's almost done. Harlan's half done.
Bellevue's started with fiber to begin with.
Right. Some of these started with fiber to begin with. Bellevue, right down the river here. Technically, they started with a cable network, but they started with an old-fashioned cable network that a private company put in back in the 80s. It was falling apart. The guy was retiring, didn't want to run it anymore. He was going to just shutter it, and the city said, don't do that, we need cable. So they bought it, but then they realized once the internet came along, we got to do something here, so they rebuilt it to fiber to the home.
Actually,
Twice, yeah, that's right, because they just had to replace their first-generation equipment. So most of these ones that are operating still older systems with a cable system are in the process of evaluating when, not if, when they're going to convert it to fiber to the home. That may be 2 years from now, it may be 10 years from now. But most progressive, forward-looking operators understand that the demands of today's consumers are really only going to be met over the long term with direct fiber connections. The coax is in there. They figured a lot of magic how to get a gigabit out of that when it's on. And so the problem is keeping it on because it's older technology and it's more subject to failure. Fiber networks have very little in the network that can go wrong besides you digging a hole in your backyard and plant a tree and putting it through the fiber. So don't do that. Iowa one call. So So that's one of the reasons why we've seen the rebuilds going on in Iowa. Again, these are community-owned networks, and they're willing to make that investment because it's for their community. A private provider, it's a harder investment for them to justify because they have to, they have to generate profits for shareholders. This is kind of the process that usually happens to build, to go from idea to inception for a municipal utility. I mentioned down here in Dubuque, you had that referendum in 2005. There were about 40 towns that voted in the same day. About 30 of them approved that referendum, and only 2 have actually built networks. Because what happened there was those elections, those groups did not start from the ground up. So there was not a lot of momentum in the community. They were kind of started from the bottom down, and they were having the votes because they were worried about the laws changing. But you guys are in that position where you had to vote a long time ago. Legally, the city of Dubuque has a telecommunications utility. It just doesn't sell services on it.
Doesn't have any money.
Doesn't have any money. It hasn't built it out. I mean, they do have some facilities, right, but they don't operate it in a retail environment. Usually after you do the vote, a feasibility study follows. A feasibility study is basically designed to figure out how we could do this and how much is it going to cost. What will it cost to build a network? And therefore, based on that cost, how much revenue will it need to generate on a regular basis in order to pay the bills? Which helps you determine how much would you have to charge for your gigabit internet or your TV or whatever you decide to offer on that service, so that you can figure out, is this a financially prudent thing for the community to do to pay itself back over a period of time? Because these networks generally take years to repay themselves. You borrow money up front to build it, and then the revenue from you guys buying services goes back to pay those bills over time along with the operating costs. After a feasibility study, you get an engineer to do a final design, assuming that the feasibility study says, this is a good idea, guys, you should do this. And they don't always say that, but usually they do. You do a final design, detailed cost estimates, you line up some financing, you go out and get bids for construction companies to build the network, they go out and build it, and finally at the end, it's time to start turning customers on. That process, if we take out the referendum here, by the way, that you guys did a long time ago, from here to there is not going to be a finger snap. It's going to take a while. A couple of years at least to work through that process. But you've got to start somewhere, or you're going to be 2 years down the road and still thinking about why didn't we do this. Any questions about that process?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who pays for the feasibility study?
Usually the city.
The city?
Yep. So in almost every cases, it's the city. If there's a municipal utility already, they might pay for it. We had an instance in Decorah. They did their feasibility study last year, and the city was reluctant. I think their feasibility study was like $60,000. The city was reluctant to budget all that, so they had their local group, which was called Decorah Fast Fiber, fundraise. They raised over $30,000, and they paid half of the feasibility study. And actually, the city then ended up getting a grant from the local economic development authority for some of it as well. So the elements of feasibility that happen, I kind of divide into 2 pieces. The why would we do this, and the how would we do this. The why is things like this, right? Learning what citizens want and need. Is there a strong interest in it? Do you think you're being underserved today? Are you dissatisfied with your services? Is your community supportive of the concept of community ownership? Because some communities may say, no, we got to leave that stuff to private enterprise. We shouldn't be involved in that. Other communities say, nope, we are self-reliant. We're going to do this ourselves. And that's not always a political thing, by the way. Most of the networks that we have in Iowa, we're building communities that are very fiscally conservative, but they're also very proactive when it comes to community engagement and doing things. So that's kind of the why. You measure it, you figure out, okay, we think we'll get a 70% take rate in year 5, and based on that, oh, this is looking good. Meanwhile, on the other side, the how part of it, you're trying to figure out what it's going to cost to build a network. You have to actually kind of lay it out on a map and say, okay, we need this many miles of fiber, we need this many connectors, this many boxes, this many routers, all the stuff that technical people like Dave worry about. Then that all goes into a business plan that says, here's what it's going to cost, here's what the revenue's got to be, here's how many years it's going to cost to pay it back, here's the interest you'll pay on that money you borrow, and basically comes out and says, we think you should do this, or you could do this. It's always the community's decision. Now, myself and a partner of mine, we have actually gone through a process where we've talked to a bunch of communities that didn't want to do all this at once. They were concerned about spending $40,000 to do the how. They just, before they figured out if people wanted them to do it. So they split this into two pieces. They did what we call a community broadband study here, where we did engagement, education, measurement, community surveys. We provided the decision makers with evidence that there was enough interest in it and there would be enough political support for them to move forward with the rest. Now here in Dubuque, through your petition drive and the fact that you already have a very active group, you likely would go right into doing the whole thing at once, which is more time efficient as well. Little selfless, shameless plug here. We are, because there's been so much interest in broadband in community, among community activists the past few months, I'm putting together what I'm calling the Community Broadband Summit. It will be held on the 20th of March. It's a Tuesday. It's going to be in Des Moines at the Holiday Inn and Suites on Merle Hay Road. You are all invited. It is free, and lunch will be provided. We're lining up a sponsor that will provide lunch for everybody. I have a copy of a flyer that has the agenda and the topics. We're going to talk about a little bit some of the stuff that I talked about today, why fiber networks are better and how they work. Very high level. We're not going to ask you to design anything, right? We've got a speaker, State Representative Liz Bennett from Cedar Rapids, who introduced a net neutrality bill in the Iowa legislature. She's going to be talking about why that's important to her and also what the legislative perspective is on this issue. We're going to talk about how you organize a successful citizen campaign. We've got people there from Vinton and Decorah that actually got together, raised money, had a successful campaign, and they have moved forward now with feasibility. We're going to have some roundtable discussions, and then hopefully lots of time for networking. So if anybody from Dubuque wants to come down, you can talk to people in Ames or Boone or Davenport or the other communities that are going through this and learn more about the process. You'll also be able to talk to people like Dave who've done it and pick their brains a little bit. And I think you learn as much from that as you do by some boring presentation. So I've got copies of this and I'll pass them around. You're welcome to take one if you're able to go. Go to the website that's listed there and you can register and get a ticket from Eventbrite. Again, there's no charge and lunch will be included. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Who comes up with a plan?
Who comes up with the plan? It should be the community that comes up with the plan. Absolutely. It should be you and all of you in this room, your community leadership, city council, boards, commissions, whoever's involved on the leadership piece, and the people that know how to do this, the consultants, the engineers, the technicians, those folks, all working together to come up with that plan. And that's a lot of that is what happens during that feasibility study process, right? When you come out of that, you've got a plan, you've got construction bids that can go out and a construction company could say, I'll do that for this much money. And you should have a business plan of not only how you're going to build it and roll it out, but how are you going to market it? How are you going to price it? How are you going to position it? Which TV channels you're going to have if you're going to do video? What are your internet speed levels going to be? And again, it's that whole group in the community that are making those decisions. Yes?
I know one of the questions that comes up is how a community will pay for it. And
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that many of them are self-sustaining. Is that true, or how can you speak to that question of?
All of them in Iowa are self-sustaining. In fact, under Iowa law, they have to be. Iowa law, although it doesn't place a lot of restrictions on it, it does require these systems to be standalone. So when a utility starts up and you build a new utility under Iowa law, you can get money from what they call any lawful source, right? So that could be borrowing it from a local bank. That could be selling bonds on the public bond market. That could be passing a hat. That could be investors on shareholders on a local level. Anywhere you get it there. But after you've built the network going forward, those operational costs cannot be subsidized by any other source other than the revenues that are coming in from the sale of the telecom facilities and the sale of the services. So I'm going to go back there first and then come back to you.
Yes, if I understand sort of what you're talking about, is it fair to say in Dubuque, you're kind of, if you do something like this, we're displacing current providers. Is that a fair statement?
You will displace their customer base, but they won't go away necessarily.
Yeah, they put copper in the ground and they're
Yes.
stuck with and they're not going to pull it out.
Yeah, correct.
So from the cities that have done things, it seems to me that once you're starting to displace current customers, that the changeover, is a very expensive thing. And so I'm looking at the cost. So like a MediaCom is choosing not to run fiber to your house and pull, and get rid of their copper, where someone else comes in and refinances them. So if there was a profit motive, MediaCom would be doing this. So is that where the trade-off comes in, that the 5 or 10% profit on the return on investment that MediaCom can't get, but a municipal utility can subsidize that and stay nonprofit,
right?
And you're saving a few percent per year. Is that accurate?
Fairly accurate.
Okay.
The reason why it's harder for a public or a private company like a MediaCom to justify that expense is they are required under the business model they operate under to get a quicker return on investment. They may want their money back in 3 to 5 years if they're going to make that investment. So they're only going to make that investment in places where that return on that investment makes sense. This is capitalism 101, right? We can't change it. We don't want to change it. A public entity, such as a city or a utility, does not have to have a rate of return that supports a 3 to 5 year payback.
Right.
They can go to the public bond market or a banker and say, hey, we'll have enough cash flow to pay these loan payments for the next 15 years. And the banker says, okay. And of course, you got to make sure you're budgeting enough to pay for the stuff that breaks, because things still break. You got to pay for technicians and trucks and operating expenses and internet bandwidth and all that stuff, but you budget it so that you always have enough money to support that debt repayment.
And so for a company like MediaCom today, you're talking about the $500,000 houses that are being built.
Yep.
I assume MediaCom is running fiber to those houses.
No.
They're still.
I don't think MediaCom's doing fiber anywhere yet to the home. Maybe I'm wrong, Dave. Dave might know more.
They have a few small subdivisions they're doing, like in Florida or somewhere like that.
I just figured that once you trench, it's
Nowhere in
just-
Iowa they're doing fiber to the home that I know of.
Even though it's actually
Even new.
cheaper to put the glass in the ground now, but it's
Okay, so-
not part of their operating
I'm
infrastructure.
not sure what's going on in Dubuque, but in Cedar Falls, they won't build out into a new subdivision unless they get enough customers that call.
Oh, I
and
understand that,
service.
but once I, bring in a trencher, okay, but I'll take your word for it, thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Related to that, most subdivisions in Dubuque currently, to qualify for TIF funding, are required to put fiber in the subdivision.
Oh, okay.
Have fiber installed, so all of our new subdivisions have fiber installed, even if it's not.
Is it fiber all the way to the individual premise, though?
My understanding.
Okay. Because there's fiber all over, right?
And who's supplying service over that fiber?
That's a different question.
Okay. That's something as part of this community process you'll want to evaluate. If that's MediaCom's fiber, then they're going to use their fiber and you'll have to put your own in. If it's the city is putting fiber or conduit out to those subdivisions, then that's an asset that could be repositioned for a community-owned service. Yes, you had one before.
What kind of political backing specifically in Dubuque will this have? is there any sort of people in like powerful positions that can help like push this any farther?
I don't know particularly about Dubuque. Christine could probably speak to that, other than the fact I can tell you in most communities, it's not really political. I mean, it's not partisan political, right? We're so used to hearing about Republicans and Democrats hating each other. It's not a partisan issue. It's more of a, where they think the community's interests lie. So, most communities, the community leadership, the powers that be, so to speak, get behind these projects pretty quickly. And Christine, I don't know if you've had, I know you've had conversations with some of those folks, but I don't know if they've, publicly stated that they're
Sure.
doing that or not.
Well, I can say that we've had a few city council members that have signed the petition. Additionally, I guess the way that I think about it is that the city council works for us, and so we are the power in our community.
That's true.
So when we come to the city council and show them, look, there are 700 of us that want this, that they'll take that seriously.
Yeah, and everybody might have a particular point of view on that, and you might have somebody who's in a position of community leadership that says, well, I'd rather spend that money on this, or I'd rather invest that money in that. And that's fine. They're going to have different perspectives. But again, leading from the grassroots up, I think, is a really smart way to do this. And you guys have already started that process.
The original referendum is kind of something to fall back on. I know it's quite a while ago, but still, a lot of interest back then.
Yeah.
I think it got shut down because the cost was
Yeah, I think there was an early feasibility study that pegged the cost at $100 million, and
things have changed.
Things have changed a lot since
The
then.
cost
so.
of fiber's come way down. The cost of technology's come way down. So it's a whole different ballgame now.
Yes.
Um,
I'll come to you next.
You mentioned that Spencer had its own electric utility, municipal utility.
Yep.
So rather than a cooperative or municipal, here we've got private,
Correct.
client. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of infrastructure, but how does that, generally speaking, impact the challenges that we face trying to get this through?
Well, one of the challenges that is something that you'll have to confront, and this will be something that you'll want to spend a lot of time on in developing your plan, is creating a new utility out of nothing versus adding a new utility to an existing infrastructure, right? So when we were in Spencer or in Cedar Falls or many other communities, you had the Spencer Municipal Utilities Board. They operated an electric utility and a water utility, and we're just going to take a new utility and we're going to add it into that mix. We already have a governance structure. We already have bylaws. We already have a mission statement. We're just going to continue that mission with this new group of services. So that can be a challenge, but again, those are all things that you can work through. The other thing too is that telecommunications is much different than any other city service because it's competitive. So what's often one of the biggest pushes, the hardest things to get done, is to create a culture within that new utility that people understand you have to earn that business. You're not the only choice for town like you are for water. You're not the only choice in town for electricity like, say, the electric company is. They can choose to get services from somebody else. So you have to have a culture of customer service that will allow you to compete effectively against the other guys. That shouldn't be a heavy lift, because one of the reasons people like municipal utilities is because they are closer to the customer and they can respond easier, quicker, faster to customer complaints, service outages, etc. So
I think you were actually asking, I think you missed the mark there a little bit.
Okay. Not the last time.
About the private utility that's already here, and how, because you do have to work with that electric utility that's here, which is Alliant, correct?
Right.
The pole attachment agreement, that's not a problem. They have to give you a pole attachment agreement. I mean, it is a cost. You pay so much per pole. I don't know, $10
That's an
or $5,
ongoing
whatever
cost.
it is these days.
that's an operational
That's
cost.
an operational type cost.
Yep.
There will be utility easements within the city, that any place that's underground. That's usually not an issue. Of course, I would imagine the city has some sort of planning entity that has all the drawings and everything, and you might be able to draw from that that group that does that too. And using that same, maybe that same technology that they use to document everything, the plant itself. I don't see, it shouldn't be a hurdle.
And the other thing too is if you did, build an all underground network, then you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about renting pole space from Alliant. But if you do go with an overhead network, then there is a procedure, established procedure in place to work out those deals.
Is that, you could imagine a network where it's more feasible to dig, we do that, but in
Potentially,
other areas,
yeah.
we might have pole sharing agreements, at least until.
Yeah, I don't know what's underneath your soil here. If it's bedrock a foot down, then underground is not a real good option.
Yeah, a lot of, there's a lot of bluffs, probably a lot of limestone here. So
Okay, well then
there's going to be
be
places where there's not a lot of topsoil, so there's probably poles.
Yeah.
I mean, you can you'll follow the lead. If electric went underground, you'll probably go underground. If they went overhead, you'll probably
That's
go
generally
overhead.
what happens.
Recently, they've been burying more of their main lines.
Have they?
In my year, what they did a couple years ago, the service lines are still overhead, but the main trunk line are down below. The transformers are on the ground instead of on the poles.
I'm going to come
And
to you, but this
that's
gentleman
shooting
was
for a
next.
higher reliability is what they're doing,
Yeah.
because this area, weather,
I think it'd be more
overhead
pronounced since they did
trees
this,
and wind and ice storms, they're just trying to do a good service. So,
Well, I'm just curious, first of all, about the transparency of the feasibility study.
Mhm.
And then second of all, if you could speak to if you have encountered any sort of resistance from the city governments.
Sure. Transparency of the feasibility study, that should be a public document.
Sure.
Now, there may be specific pieces of it that are not made public. For example, if your engineer doing the feasibility study goes and gets a quote from a company for internet bandwidth, that may be subject to a non-disclosure agreement, in which case perhaps that part of it's not releasable. So you might see that the bandwidth is this much, but you can't identify in the public part who you got that quote from.
Sure.
Little things like that. So what was the second part of your question?
Just if you've encountered any resistance, and maybe speak to how you handle the resistance from local governments.
Most of the communities that get this far, we don't see a lot of that. Where we've seen a lot of, I wouldn't say resistance, but lack of passion about the issue are ones that never get this far.
Okay.
They're the ones that had the votes back the same time you guys did and just haven't done anything because their priorities changed. Or maybe there's one or two people that just think it's a silly idea, or maybe there was just not enough interest in the community. And you always can have community leader, whether it be a city council person or somebody else, that could resist it. But again, that's why starting from the grassroots up shows that this is something you want the community to do. That will help you make that case.
Right on.
I'll go to you and then back to there to you.
Yeah, so old people like me remember the day when long-distance telephone service was deregulated, and we had copper coming into our house, and they forced AT&T to allow any long-distance service provider.
Yes.
So if the city comes in and puts in fiber infrastructure, is the model that it's like a roadway now, and if I as a customer at the end of this fiber says I want to use this fiber and I still want to buy from MediaCom, the cities tend to allow MediaCom to use the fiber to my house to sell me service, or does the city say, no, I'm a monopoly, I own the fiber, I own the light, you're out of luck, MediaCom, and any other provider who would like to light up my fiber.
So most cases, I don't know of a single case, at least in Iowa, where any municipal network owner is allowing
Competition.
Over their network. There's
Yeah,
there's competition over their networks.
Right. So
Now, there is a model called an open access model, and there are a few deployments across the U.S., but really none in Iowa.
It's never been really successful.
Right.
Pardon me?
It's never been really successful.
And the open access model says, okay, we're going to build the network, and you end user can get your service from whoever wants to connect to us, whether that's MediaCom or somebody else or a brand new entity, right? The problem with open access networks is, There's some technology hoops you have to jump through to make that all work, right? But the real big issue is then, if you as citizens are going to invest money in this network, and you know that network's going to have to be paid for over time, that money's got to come through something, right? And what happens is, with an open access network, there may not be enough profit left over after they've paid you what you got to have for your network in order to justify them using your network. That's why most of them have said, no, we're going to own the network, we're going to be the sole retail provider using our network. And if you want to compete with us, fantastic, you have your own network.
So the deal with that the phone companies have to allow other carriers to use their lines, they're a guaranteed amount of money. And the problem with that model, you're not guaranteed that. If you're guaranteed it, then you can go out and build it and say, yeah, it's going to be paid for in 10 years or whatever it is, because we're guaranteed
I understand
we get that money.
I understand the difficulty, but I know, this issue comes about because there's a monopoly of a cable coming to our houses. If there wasn't a monopoly, we wouldn't be talking about this, I would opine.
As long as the cable were be able to meet the criteria that we talked about early on, reliability and quality and speed and everything. Yeah.
Right, but that's we put in roads, we expand roads, we pay for those, let anyone put their car on.
Yep.
So, okay.
One of the things that you can ask for in the feasibility study, and I've seen this done, is to whoever does it is, the network cost may not change, but you could ask them, show us what an open access platform would look like in our community and how that would affect the business case. In other words, they may say, well, if you go with open access, it's going to take you 25 years to pay the network off. If you go with a non-open access, just community owned, and the community is the only retailer, then it's going to cost you this much to do it. We actually did a hybrid in Spencer, and this is interesting. This was not a fiber network, right? But we had an open access on our internet service. When we started in Spencer, we said, everybody, we're going to be the cable company and we're going to be the phone company, but you can get your internet from one of any of these authorized providers that have worked out an agreement with us. And they basically paid us so much per month to access their network.
Right.
What happened was the first 3-year agreement, we had 5 ISPs sign on to this. One lasted about 2 months because they couldn't get any customers. Then it was down to 3, and then there were 3, and then there were 2. We got to the end of the 3 years of that first set of agreements, and by then customers, meaning the citizens, were demanding, I want to get my services from the utility. Why do I have to pay this middleman over here? I get your internet, or I want to get your internet from the same people I get my cable. So at the second 3-year period, we said, okay, we'll be one of the providers. So you still can choose the other 2 or you can choose us. Well, within a year, everybody switched to us. The other 2 said, oh, this isn't worth our time anymore. So it makes it sound like we were so good we ran the competition out of business. It was just the way the marketplace worked there.
Right.
So, yes?
Earlier on one of your first slides, you had the list of what our internet may or may not be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the one, I forget the wording you used, but something about, where was it?
Universally available?
There we go. I'm an educator in Dubuque,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that in Dubuque Community Schools, we are looking a lot at one-to-one laptops, so our freshmen at senior high school have laptops. Our low-income students, and even some of our students who are split between 2 different households or such, they might have internet one night and not the other.
And not the next night, yeah.
So it is a topic that we've discussed in terms of how do we, have assignments that need internet, require internet if our students don't have access to it. So can you explain how that works with how a city would go about, or how the program goes about making that? Is it like a scaled fee, or what have you seen work?
It could be however you want it to be, because it's your network.
What has
you could say anybody in town that it has kids in school gets internet for half price. You can make that decision, but in making that decision, then you have to understand that you're going to have to be willing to pay more in order to support that subsidized service. Now, there is a federal program called Lifeline that used to be exclusively to phone service. And it basically take, $9 off your phone bill if you were met certain income criteria. The FCC is in the process of repositioning that program so that that would go toward broadband services, internet. And if that happens, then you could sign up, you could qualify through various programs and then get a credit on your bill that you could say, I want that toward my broadband service.
I wish my boss today is working on that right now with the school system in Cedar Falls, because they do, they supply the Chromebooks to all the students.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already identified all those students, and there is, the school can get a subsidy. I'm not sure where it is. I didn't talk in details with them. So I don't know exactly what it's going to cost the family or the student. Is $10 or $15 a month or something like that, but it's really reduced. And the utility will be reimbursed from that subsidy coming. I don't know. It's a federal entity.
It's probably E-rate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's E-rate. Yeah, that's right. We have Mediacom actually is participating in that also, and I don't know if they are in Dubuque, but they might be.
They probably won't tell you that though.
Right, yeah, I've never heard of that, but that's Cedar Falls.
Yes,
The
we're
school district?
going to
Okay.
be doing it. We're putting it together right now.
Got it.
So do you know what percentage of your high school students have home access today, and what do you project it's going to turn into? Do you know that?
I don't know. I know it's a small number.
Who don't have it?
That don't have it.
So
I don't
small
know
being
exactly how many it
10%,
is.
or small being 10% or 30%?
I think it's under 10%.
Probably under 10%.
Yeah.
Really? That's small.
I think it's under 10%.
I'm astounded.
Yeah, the surveys I've done in other communities that are looking at this, there's still the internet penetration rate is between 85 and 90%.
I think it's just a couple hundred.
Even in places with 15 and 20%
Yeah.
poverty rates?
People are figuring out a way to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it's good.
Well,
It may be slow and it may
it's
be
become-
really expensive, and they may be eating mac and cheese for a month, but
But they've chosen,
they know
I
how
would have
to
never
do it.
guessed.
Internet's now more important than cable TV. It used to be cable TV. That was kind of the first thing that came off the, the low income. They paid their cable TV. They didn't want to lose their cable
I
TV.
would have never guessed that there were
And now
more
it's
households.
the internet. We actually have where a customer might get their electric shut off because they haven't been able to pay their bill, and they'll actually ask, "Can I keep my internet going?" Even though the electricity is going to get shut off. Well, figure that out. It doesn't work, but they
That's that important to them.
It's
Yeah.
that important to them.
Or water. I'll go without water for a minute. Please don't come into the office then, because you won't smell real good. Sorry.
So I guess that's kind of where I'm heading. So I'm a low income worker.
Mhm.
So right now I pay $68 for my whole 20 down and 2 up that I get. Could you just speak a little to what the typical municipal broadband, what kind of numbers they're getting for speed, and then what kind of price range
Sure.
are you paying?
Well, they're all over the board,
Okay.
right? And it's one of both the advantages and disadvantages of local ownership is each community decides their pricing on their own, so it's hard to map them. Most of them have for lack of a better term, kind of a lifeline tier of internet that's somewhere in that $25 to $40 a month range. My old employer, Spencer, they have a $20 a month tier. Now, it's not speedy. It's designed so you can get on, check your email, apply for a job, update your resume, do those essentials, but for $20 a month. Kind of like, that's what we used to all play for dial-up back in the day. And I don't know where you guys start, but probably somewhere in that 45, 50, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it's around 50, and it's 100 by 100. We have very few tiers. There's a lower tier, but it's to compete with the dial-up. I think it's between $25 and $30 a month, and it's only 3 megabit down, 1 megabit up, something to that effect. It's kind of like a dial-up experience.
Sure.
But it's if you just want your email, do a little browsing, buy some stuff online, things like that. Streaming video, it's not very good, but it's for the cost-conscious person that doesn't want to
Right.
pay that higher price.
So it seems like the ultimate benefit of us running our own internet is the fact that we could provide that $20, $15 service that MediaCom is reluctant and CenturyLink will never do.
If you can make it work financially.
If you can make it work
Right.
financially.
That's the
Right.
key, because there's also, then there becomes a fairness issue, right? If you are providing a subsidized service to some group of the community, then another group of the community is going to have to support that. And there are some communities that they have a philosophy that, well, we don't want to do that because we're not treating all customers equally now. We're treating some better than others. We used to, back in the Spencer days, people wanted us to give a senior discount. And we said, we treat all customers the same, whether they're 25 or 85. So we never did a senior discount. We caught a lot of flack for that, but eventually people got over it. But this is, what you're talking about is in a case of inclusion more than anything, right? This is not about picking winners or losers. This is trying to help everybody win in the days of digital economy. And so you as a local entity, a local community, a city, can figure out how you want to do that.
Right.
I always thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could say, if you got anybody, any kid in school, if they qualify for the lower reduced school lunch, they can get internet in their home of some level.
And that's exactly what Cedar Falls is using that for the benchmark.
Yep. So if it's, the gamer that makes $80,000 a year, he's not going to get that. But the kid who's, mom and dad are on a fixed income that still need to learn, right? Because we want them to grow up to be a gamer at $80,000 a year.
Right.
They should be able to get access to that service at an affordable rate for them. So, yes.
How have communities dealt with, well, for lack of a better word, interference from their existing providers? Because that's what happened in 2005. It didn't go anywhere. Because MediaCom, I don't want to say the word bribe, but basically bribed the city government to give it up.
Yeah. Well, they did that franchise negotiation where they got some fiber for the city to use and some other things there. So, you wanted to say something to that, or you just had a question? Okay, that is a big concern. Now, I'll tell you, the early days when Dave and I were working on these back in the '90s, it was tooth and nail. These guys would come in and they would fight everything you did. They were going door to door one time in Spencer. I had somebody call me, Curtis, you got to know this. They're going door to door. They're selling cable for $5 a month. So yeah, they brought in crews from all over the Midwest, direct sales people going door to door, getting $5 a month cable. And I think we had like 3 or 4 people switched. It wasn't a big impact. In the end, we just kept hammering home on the message. This is your network. This belongs to you. We built it for you. We're operating it for you. Now, if you don't support it by being a customer, that's on you. And in the end, if it fails, then you'll be back to where you were before. And that message does hammer home to people because people are very community-minded, supportive, and the average take rate of municipals in Iowa is somewhere around 70%. Now, the past few years, MediaCom in particular has not fought real hard. They've done a little bit of promotional stuff in Waverly. That's the most recent new example with Waverly's new network.
They tried to tie people to contracts.
Yeah, that's one thing they will do. They'll
It
go
only
out.
lasts so long.
Yeah, but you can work through that. You're in this for the long term, so
you really need to embrace it. I mean, competition's a good thing.
absolutely,
I mean,
it makes everybody do a better
the
job.
Everybody gains from it. Just recently, 2015, we were fortunate enough to have the president come and put us on a national stage. Anyway, Rocco was really mad. Rocco's the owner of MediaCom, and he swore that he was going to put us out of business. And so they sent a group of people to go door to door, and they were offering, I think it was $60 a month for everything, and which is less than half of what. And they got a handful of people to actually take it. There's people were so fed up with it, with MediaCom. Most of them came back after they did. I think they got about 50 people in town to sign up for it. And that was it. It's going to happen, but those 50 people really benefit. They got a really cheap deal, and for a long period of time.
Think about it this way: you're a community, right? if a customer saves $10 a month because they switched to the new municipal system and you guys were able to price it a little better because you don't have a profit margin, or they save $10 a month because Mediacom gave them a sweetheart great deal to keep them, guess what? Either way, it's $10 that's not leaving the community. It's going to circulate back through the economy. When I was in Spencer, we measured that value of money that never left pockets at about $1.3 million a year in a town of 11,000.
There was a time that we were actually, when we first started, the first 10 years, the utilities struggled. It really turned it really quickly in 1 year, but Rocco sent a guy over, same thing, he said, we're going to put you guys, either you buy us, or we buy you, or we're going to put you out of business. And our general manager stared him down and says, okay, we'll buy it. We'll pay $100 a customer. Well, it's more like $3,000 a customer. He knew he wasn't going to bite on it. We don't want them to leave. We want them to stay. We want to compete with them. It keeps us on our toes.
Yeah.
And it's a benefit to the community, and that's what it's all about. It's about the community.
Yeah, with competition, it keeps you from getting lazy. And if you didn't have competition and some new technology came along and you guys think it's really important, it makes it a little harder to kick that can down the road, right? If the other guy's going to have it too. Killer apps, we don't know what the next killer app is going to be, but something's going to come and we're all going to go, wow, I got to have that. So.
And obviously you have to hire smart people and community-oriented people to run the utility. They have to think outside the box. They have to figure out how to cut the cost, keep the cost down, so the utility can be financially feasible. But it's definitely doable.
One thing that's important to understand about the business, when we talk about broadband, we're talking about internet. That's top of everybody's minds. But most of these companies also offer cable TV, and many of them offer telephone service. Cable TV is at best a break-even proposition in most cases. It may seem like your bill goes up every month, and I'm telling you, Mediacom's not lying when they say the reason they raised that bill is because their programming costs went up. It is completely out of control. TV as a service provided by a company is unsustainable and will eventually disappear because you guys are all going to get so frustrated you're going to stream everything. And you're already doing it. And we know that. That's why when I talk to new communities that are looking at building a telecom system, fiber to the home system, I always say, don't spend a lot of capital on cable TV because it may not be around in a few years. You still need it today because there's still a good percentage of people at least that need it and want that service. But 10 years from now, that percentage is going to be really small. So don't spend $3 million on satellite dishes and all that stuff. Instead, partner with somebody else so you can get into that piece of the business without a lot of huge capital costs.
And that's what we're doing right now. So
Bellevue,
we partner with Bellevue.
Yep.
We're going to partner with Indianola and talking to any other new entrant that wants to do video. We have the head in, so.
There and then here.
I'm concerned with labor rights and keeping unions strong. How has the competition with these other companies impacted labor? Since in some cases they're organized by like CWA or things like that, and do many municipal utilities have unionized labor, or what have you seen there?
I'd say it's about half and half. Our union versus non-union shops.
I'm not familiar with the other utilities on the union, but Cedar Falls Utilities is a union shop, and we're fortunate to pay a lot higher than what Mediacom does. The money stays local. That's another thing to look at. Benefit to the community. I don't know if you could get the city, I think you have your water utility, correct? And water and sewer?
Yeah.
So you might be able to bundle that onto one bill, so it's less bills that the customer gets, another benefit. In Cedar Falls' case, it's a huge benefit because everything is on one bill. Gas, phone, garbage, sewer, water, electricity, cable TV and internet. Every utility
That's awesome.
On one bill.
If you don't mind a $400 bill.
It's one draw. Sticker shock is a little bit.
Sticker shock,
But they
yeah.
do actually allow you to split that up. You can split that up in I think at least 2, maybe 4 different payments.
You know, I think that what you'll find is in the communities, the municipals that have like union employees versus non-union, wage differentials are probably not that great. Again, and this is my own personal opinion, is a municipal employer tends to, it's much more of a relationship, it's less of a relationship of trying to get away with paying that person as little as possible. And in the telecommunications industry, you can't get away with paying as little as possible if you want good people. And one of your number one missions, right, if it's owned by you, is you want good people doing that job.
And you don't want a lot of turnover.
It has been an issue in some of the smaller communities where you will have boards or city councils that say, you know, a good telecom engineer is kind of probably going to make $110,000 a year. And the board chair for that utility may be the banker, and the banker said, this 30-year-old guy shouldn't make more than me. That can be a challenge. That's an institutional challenge you have to acknowledge up front. There are utilities where the telecom engineer is making more than the general manager, and that's part of the world we live in, because those people have a special skill set that earns them that
There's a high
additional money.
demand.
Absolutely, high demand. It's a buyer's market. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You just go to him, and then I'll go to you. Yeah.
Has any of the communities that have been doing this done anything with like captive portal or local services that you don't have to actually subscribe to have access to?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
So even if I don't have so even if I don't have, even if I'm not paying, I can still get to the city website. I want to report a problem, things like that.
You could have it. You could offer somebody access to things that are on the network but don't go to the internet, right? You could do that.
Well, there is
routing.
no such thing as everything's accessed through the internet.
But if you've got the website, the city website,
You know how
in
like,
your
you
internal
go-
network, I don't.
So you know, like if you go to an airport and you log into their free Wi-Fi, you can only get to like 5 websites and that's it.
Oh yeah, kind of like a walled garden type approach. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no restrictions. I don't know of any of the utilities that's restricted anything. I mean, you still have to pay the service to get on our network.
Right, I
It's not
understand.
free, and we do have some Wi-Fi hotspots. Or if you go into a coffee shop and they get free Wi-Fi, that might be our network. They're buying service from us. Nothing's restricted unless they did the restriction in the coffee shop. You would get full access to everything.
I understand. No, I understand that piece. If you're paying, you get access to everything. It's more if you have a connection that's not, it doesn't have access to subscribe or no one's doing anything. Where if you plug in that connection, there's still certain functionality that's active.
I don't know if anybody's doing that.
Yeah, we're not doing anything like that.
But I'm not so sure it's not achievable.
You know, unless, like the airport, maybe the airport
Well, yeah.
might be restricting it. They're only letting you look at the stuff
Well,
that they,
it's like-
but as far as, I mean, if that was the airport
Well, if
in
the
Cedar Falls, we would not restrict anything. It'd be
So,
full open.
Yeah, like with the airport example, it's that you log in, you can go to like these 3 sponsors and the airport information site, and then if you sign in and pay them, then they'll let you go to everything else.
Mhm.
It's how the airports tend to do it. The captive portal. A lot of hotels do that same approach, especially the high-end ones for some reason. I wasn't sure if any of the municipalities have been doing something like that, so that because like I know if you have phone in general, they always have to enable 911.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kind of, does that connect to that at all, where it's like, okay, you can always log onto the city website, because like on Dubuque, you can go there if there's a street sign that's gone.
Right. You can do
go
report. Yeah.
And still enable some of that functionality.
I'm just wondering what the use case would be for it if you have many people that would have a computer that they would only use to go to the city website that don't want to surf the internet with.
Some of it, I think there may be some aspects of it, like for the schools,
Mhm.
maybe you include the school mail systems on those.
I think that, hey, the technology will allow you guys to do whatever you think is important. there'll be a cost to some of those things that you want to do, and there may be benefits to it, but I think, you know, especially now there's a lot of virtualization going on. We won't even get into that. But there's a lot of things that are going on in the technology as it evolves that allow a lot of automation and things to happen so that the router could say, oh, this person does not have an internet connection, but we'll let them go here because the city has decided they want people to be able to go there, or the library website, or the whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know of any utility that's restricting anything. Like maybe the entity that's getting the service from the utility might be.
He's not really talking about restricting. He's saying, could a non-internet customer be able to connect to certain things without necessarily paying for internet service, right? Yeah. That's more of a
only through,
controlled permissions.
Yeah, only it's got to be someone paying for it. Utility that, at least our utility doesn't give any service out for free in any form or fashion that I know of.
Right.
That even lets you go to certain locations.
Dave, right?
Yes.
I've heard some people say we'd be hard pressed to find this situation in a city that didn't also have the locally owned electric utility. Cedar Falls has an electric utility, right? Can you speak to the advantages in ways that helped you versus if you hadn't had that, would you have been able to do the same program?
There's a lot, as I call synergies there. So they had electric linemen, so they can do the pole work. They already had accountants. They already had customer service people. Everything was there, so that the support of the utility was already there. They might have had to add a few people here and there to fill some gaps, but there was a big advantage in that respect. I still say, I mean, that most towns have that with their water and their sewer utility to start with. You know, you have other city employees that do that. You know, have an HR, you have the HR, and you have financial people. Yeah, exactly.
Some of that.
I think a city can still have those synergies, maybe not quite as many, but still enough. And there are some
We just have one in Iowa, Rhinebeck. Rhinebeck has a telecom utility. They don't have an electric utility. Just have telecom, water, and then sewer. But they're a small town and they're very efficient. They only have 2 employees, so they're able to do that, and they share some services. If they need a hole dug, they'll call the street department and they'll go dig the hole for them, and they'll send a bill to the telecom utility for digging the hole. So there's a lot of synergies that can happen even on a small basis. Some of the electric utilities in the early days of the networks that were built were also financial contributors to the building of the network because they wanted to have access to a network so they could do smart grid. And so in some cases, such as in Spencer, our electric utility in Spencer actually borrowed or lent the money to help build the network. And so that was another reason why it was maybe an easier lift then. I don't think we see as much of that anymore because the municipal model has been proven to be successful. So getting financing for it, as long as your business case makes sense to a banker or a bond seller, the money is available. So
I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel, but
yeah.
But in our
maybe a
case,
few
it would take
spokes.
a lot more staffing, because unfortunately a lot of these departments that we're mentioning are kind of at their peak of, with what they can do, so.
Yep. You'll need more people and different kinds of people and different kinds of expertise, and maybe some different software and hardware and things like that.
But are there other examples that of cities and communities that don't have a utility? You said there's just the one that you can think of?
Rhinebeck's the only one in Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah, that does not have an electric utility alongside it. Yeah. Decorah does not have an electric utility. They're in their feasibility process right now. Charles City does not have an electric utility. They are very I think they're going to build a network. They're working pretty closely with New Hampton right now.
Well, and I think, if I remember correctly, I think Harvard recently did a study that looked at, because I know that that has come up in other conversations I've had too, if you don't have an electric utility, that it makes it more difficult to have successful broadband. But that particular study looked at these other cities and said that that's not necessarily the case.
Right. Now, your water utility, for example, could benefit from having access to a telecommunications network because they could then utilize that for operating the water utility, whether it be reading meters or operating pumps or measuring the levels in a water tower or, you know, alarms at well systems. I mean, most of our systems that are doing telecom are doing that sort of intra-utility sharing, where there's they can identify outages quicker and restore service quicker.
And the Cedar Falls was using phone technology, old technology for that type of monitoring the water system. And now they use our fiber, so it's, like you said, it's faster, but we also save the utility a lot of money. Because, you know, the CenturyLink was charging them a lot.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, a lot of money.
Thanks, folks.
I wanted to make sure, can we please thank both of you for great to have this available to us. I also wanted to make sure that we had some time for you folks to share about why you're interested in municipal broadband. I think that's a really important piece of what we're trying to do here. So if anyone would be willing to share, maybe just from your seat, about why you're interested in this campaign.
I lived in Cedar Falls for 6 years and I loved it. That's why, I mean, just the benefits. I was a college student there and I stuck around for a couple years after. It was much more affordable than going through Mediacom or CenturyLink, and like they said, everything was on one bill and you could budget very, very easily. And I had a problem one day, they came the same day, whereas I have CenturyLink now, I had a problem that was 4 days.
I'm a huge proponent of net neutrality, so when I saw that I could do something for my community in the form of municipal internet, I was really interested in trying to do my part and help out.
Super.
None of the three providers in town are reliable. Not a single one of them can get you a service that's not going to go down for at least half an hour a day. And I've been with all three of them. So we have Cadillac, Mediacom, and CenturyLink. I'm with Mediacom at the moment because when they work, they're the fastest. And they might only work 23 hours of the day, but they're the best when they do work. So that's the one I ended up with. And that's not really a...
That's just so foreign to the world of the municipals, because if you were having that many outages, Dave, you'd either be out of a job, or your boss would be out of a job, or you'd have people yelling at you at Hy-Vee when you're getting groceries. You actually live there. I honestly, when I was working in Spencer, I couldn't go to the grocery store without talking to 10 people about telecom stuff. Say, how do I do this on the internet? How do I do that? Okay, but that's okay. That's part of the job. So.
That's why I favor the more participatory local economy, the resilient economy. I think that's all.
Self-reliant.
Self-reliant.
Absolutely.
Money's, at least a major portion of money staying in the economy in town.
A lot of it's going to ESPN. I hate to break that to
know.
you, but keep as much as you can.
I'd like to be able to, when I call, if I do have a service issue, to call and talk to somebody locally. Because when I call Mediacom, it's very much automated. I may or may not get a live person. Typically, the wait times are long, and I get to leave a message. They probably will call me back, but it may be an automated callback. Mm-hmm. So it's very impersonal. And if somebody is being paid to do that job, they're not in my community. They're who knows where. So
Dubuque, Illinois? Was that Dubuque?
Exactly. Oh, you're pronouncing Dubuque. Oh, yeah, that's a whole other deal.
Oh, wait, there is only one Dubuque? Okay, never mind. That lady back there had one first, I think.
When we moved here a few years ago, we got Mediacom cable, and we moved here for my job, and my husband was looking for a job. During this time, we had cell phone service, and for whatever reason, our cell phone service, AT&T, didn't work at our house. And then MediaCom was installed by a horribly unprofessional technician. Didn't give us the right electrical cord for it, cable for it, anyway. But you know, looking for a job is just about impossible because there was this one corner of the kitchen where we could get a signal for the cell phone. And then the internet was constantly out. And so like you couldn't, you know, you needed a phone to call
I
to
couldn't
internet.
send out my resumes.
Couldn't
Couldn't
send
send out my resumes.
And then we lived right on a busy street, so we went outside to use the phone, you know, the traffic was so loud. So it was, you know, it just felt like ugh. There was nothing we could do. There was a lot, I don't know.
You're doing a phone interview outside, and the guy on the other line
No,
thinks
I did.
he thinks you're working at a truck stop or something.
Well, it's funny because I'd go, like, we'd be on Loris, it's funny now. Yeah, and I'd be trying to call somebody, and like, you go down Loris, this is what you hear down Loris, ka-dunk, 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 and I'd be on the phone, you know, trying to do it, you know, talk to people, or, it was not.
Steve. So I just don't wish that on anyone else.
Well, for me, I really try to look at the big picture here, and when we're talking about universal availability, you know, we're facing some major problems with wealth income inequality in this country.
Yeah.
So one of the ways to combat that is to make sure that people are on an equal footing when it comes to communication for a variety of reasons, and education being probably the biggest. So, you know, you're talking about putting job applications in, that is a huge part of that. But education, you know, I was an online college student. For me, it was the only thing that made sense. I wasn't able to get out to school. You know, I had to work full time. So being able to be at home and to do that on my own time gave me a leg up. So I feel like if we're not allowing people that access and making it affordable, we're just doing the country and our community a disservice.
Right.
You know, so we got to make sure our children are prepared for this technical world we're entering, and if they're not able to access the internet, they have no chance. So
I am of the opinion that internet access in particular should be as ubiquitous, reliable, and affordable as electricity is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And could you imagine having an hour a day where your electricity doesn't work?
Right.
It's just it would be unacceptable, and you shouldn't have to live with
It took
that.
them 4 days.
Or it took it 4 days to get it
Right.
back up.
And I mean, it's just getting, you know, by the day, we're seeing that be ever more important.
Yeah.
So with the fiber network, we're now hitting a 5.9 reliability within the city.
That means 99.999% reliability.
Which is where telephone companies used to be
Right.
years ago, and not so much anymore with the old copper, but very high reliability compared to what MediaCom can offer today. They just can't do it with that old copper system that they have now.
I've every year we get our internet and phone through CenturyLink, and every year I have to go through this process of calling the customer service and then get transferred 2 or 3 times to actually talk to the person who can keep me the rate I was getting, so I don't have to get gouged. And every year I have this moment where I open the phone bill and it's like, oh my god, it's like 50% higher than it was.
I haven't had time to make that call, actually.
I know, and just keep paying. And
Yeah, it's
they
3
put
hours.
such barriers in front of you trying to just get to the base rate that you should be getting to begin with.
I switched back to
Right? Like, let's
MediaCom
just
because I was
simplify
thinking of
this.
making that phone call every year.
Right. And I made the phone call this year, and my rate hasn't gone down as I said it was. So I need to make the phone call again, and I'm pretty fed up, and I'm excited at the possibility of a simple, you know, community-based solution which has better customer service and a simple rate plan where I don't have to haggle for an hour on waiting on hold just to get the rate I should.
That is really important. I didn't mention that, but I think that is also another thing that's become very important is transparency in rate structures. And there are certain things that you can't get away without, right? Because like there's going to be a universal service fund because that's mandated by the government. But most of the broadband utilities in Iowa that I work with closely have had a very transparent rate structure so that it's easy to know what you're paying for and what you're getting. And the thing you see on the TV ad that they're saying $29.95 a month, and then there's 3/4 of the screen is fine print. That's just not something anybody does in this
Surcharge
world.
for this.
Yes.
This.
Yes.
Actual cost may vary.
Kate, and then did you want to say?
Yeah.
You know, just yesterday I got an email, full disclosure, I'm on the city council.
Okay.
I got an email from a customer, or I'm sorry, a constituent who was an angry customer about the internet situation, and she was elderly, and she was just fed up with hassles and rates and not being able to afford things, but more so because I represent the north end in the 3rd Ward, and we have a problem with a food desert there, and we've also kind of had, it sounds like we kind of have an internet desert as well. You know, I have colleagues that I work with that can't even get CenturyLink, they only get MediaCom. And then there were issues with service so bad, now they're trying the only other option that's there. So, you know, I just want to I'm just here to learn and explore all the options, because you know, like it's also all throughout our comprehensive plan that high-speed internet is a priority of flourishing communities. And so it looks like we need to get on top.
So really, we're just helping the city council do what they say that they're going to do, right? What did you want to add? Go ahead.
Oh no.
No, sorry, up here.
Oh,
yeah.
So, what's the next step? Like, what can I do like in the near future to help push this movement of municipal internet?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for asking. I would love to talk about that.
Fastball right down.
Right, I know. I'll pay you later. So lots of things, right? So as we've been saying from the very beginning of our campaign, our goal is to get 700 signatures and bring them with as many of us as possible to the city council. So our next step will be to collect those signatures. We're going to do some canvassing, so we would love to have each and every one of you, if you're interested in helping us canvass, so just standing out in front of Eagle or Hy-Vee and collecting signatures. In my experience, it's not a hard sell. Right? Everybody hates their internet provider. Everybody wants something reliable and better than what they have, right? So asking, not only in person, but we can continue circulating the petition online. Many of you probably know this, but DubuqueMunicipalInternet.org is our website, where there's a link at the bottom for our campaign. Thanks to John for making a great promo video that you can watch on our website, but also share on Facebook. We have the petition up there, so if you haven't had a chance to sign the petition, you have that opportunity. And also, if you're interested in being in working on the canvassing stuff, then let me know and I'll make sure that we get you plugged in. There are also buttons that we made to cover the cost of this room. So $1 for a button, and you can distribute them. Okay, yeah, Naomi in the back has them over there. So that's our next step, and I'm hoping that, oh yeah, go ahead.
I would just say, like with the canvassing, we've canvassed, a lot of us have experience canvassing in other things. We'll do it in teams, it'll be fun, you'll meet people. We'll try to make it an enjoyable experience, so not a nerve-wracking one.
So.
Christine, do you have sheets of paper like that we could take with us, and people that we know, friends, family members, have them sign?
That's a great point. I can send you the petition. Okay. So I can email, why don't I email everyone that has signed up? I'll email you a copy of the petition so you can circulate it amongst your friends and family. Again, it's not really a hard sell. In my experience, people are eager to hear about this alternative.
Just make sure you email it in one of those 23 hours where the internet's
Right, I know. I will also say now would be a great time to start writing letters and calling your representatives. Right, if the city council starts hearing from now until this summer that we want municipal broadband, that's something that they'll pay attention to. And we will put on our website the wards and the contact information, so you know just who to call. And then, of course, writing letters to the editor would be great as well. So the more buzz that we can get in the community, the more powerful our movement will become. So again, I want to thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And thank you again to Curtis and Dave for coming all the way from the middle of Iowa.
Parts unknown.
Yeah. So thank you all.
On for a minute if anybody wants to. come
Oh,
up
I
and-
should say we
okay.
live streamed the event, so we'll share that online as well if you want to share it with folks who weren't able to make it.